This is the Rebel Call channel. Welcome to today's show. This is an important video about Hurricane Milton. And I think it's something you'll be able to share with people so they can start to realize that these types of events, even though it's been ingrained in people's minds that you can't control the weather, are in fact controllable, manipulated, man-made events by our own government. They have been perfecting weather manipulation and weather control dating back to the 1930s. They have thousands of patents that openly discuss weather modification and weather control. And guess what? The weather modification they're talking about is not to make it rain in places that there are droughts. Otherwise, we wouldn't have droughts. Otherwise, we wouldn't have this thing that they call climate change. We wouldn't have any real problems with the climate. But they've created this facade, this boogeyman called climate change so that they can get away with weaponizing the weather against their own citizens. If you look back at things like Operation Popeye and what our government has told us in the past, they've told us that they were hell-bent on figuring out weather modification and weather control to use as a weapon for war.
We shall propose further cooperative efforts between all the nations in weather prediction and eventually in weather control.
It lays the predicate foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
Well, newsflash, 80 years later, we haven't gone to war with China, we haven't gone to war with Russia and caused tornadoes and hurricanes and monsoons and tsunamis. The governments are all working together. That's right, they're all working together, playing you like a fiddle into thinking that there's a Republican side and a Democratic side. There's nothing more than a compromised communist global government who is using weather modification against the civilians with the hopes of not just ruining and destroying your lives, but bringing about climate laws. And these climate laws will enslave you worse than anything you saw during the pandemic. So I want to cover multiple things, including simulations, because some of you may have seen there is a simulation that was posted to a YouTube channel, Tampa Bay RPC, where they were openly showing a mock test run of a massive catastrophic hurricane simulation hitting Tampa Bay. Why does this matter? Because this is a common theme. We've seen test runs, we've seen dry runs, we've seen simulations, and they show us these simulations and then they bring them to life. Everybody should remember, if they don't, Event 201. They showed us a simulation of an outbreak, and then what occurred? An outbreak. You may remember they were running a drill on the 11th day of September. And then what happened? It went live. These events that happen at schools, guess what? Operation Orion, these are government drills that go live. The Boston Marathon, I can continue on and on and on. We could talk about Maui as well. How conveniently at the time of that fire, all the leaders on the island of Maui had left the island to go to a meeting on the Big Island where they were talking about that exact same thing potentially happening to Maui, and then it did. So before I show you the simulation that is online, which you can't make up because the dates even line up 4 years in advance when they released this, the dates line up with the dates of Hurricane Milton. But I want to start with the name Hurricane Milton. Many of you probably have noticed the name Hurricane Milton. Some of you probably thought in the past, how do they come up with the names for these storms? Just like, how did they come up with the names for a lot of those variants they kept telling us about? And at the time, I talked in detail about how they had all the variants lined up well ahead of time, and then they just kept giving us variant after variant after variant that they conveniently had named already. Well, they like to tell us the same type of thing with the hurricanes. Well, we have these hurricanes that are just lined up in the future. We have them all named so that when it comes, we don't have to all get together and give it a fancy little name. That's how they get away with naming things so specifically and so deliberately, like Hurricane Milton. And Hurricane Milton is named after John Milton. John Milton, who is a famous writer who is best known for publishing Paradise Lost. Now we can look at it from multiple angles, right? Paradise. We look at Florida as a paradise in the United States of America. Specifically over the last couple of years, we've heard the word paradise used with Florida more so than anywhere in the continental U.S. because it seemed like a paradise for people to go to, where the government wasn't going to infringe on their rights, where there wasn't going to be government overreach. We were told it's a paradise for people who think a lot like we do. So it's very interesting that it's called Hurricane Milton after John Milton, who wrote Paradise Lost. And for those of you that don't know how the poem goes or what the plot of the poem is, I'll give you the generic rundown. It's considered Milton's masterpiece. It helped solidify his reputation as one of the greatest English poets of all time. The poem concerns the biblical story of the fall of man, the temptation of Adam and Eve by the fallen angel Satan, and their expulsion from the Garden of Eden. The story has two narrative arcs, one about Satan and the other about Adam and Eve. It begins after Satan and the other fallen angels have been defeated and banished to hell. Once in hell, Satan employs his skills to organize his followers, where he's aided by people like demons like Beelzebub and Moloch. You know, Moloch, famous for what? All these elites worshiping him at Bohemian Grove. At the end of the debate, Satan volunteers to corrupt the newly created earth and God's new and most favored creation, mankind. At several points in the poem, an angelic war over heaven is recounted from different perspectives. Satan's rebellion follows the epic convention of large-scale warfare. The battles between the faithful angels and Satan's forces take place over 3 days. At the final battle, the Son of God single-handedly defeats the entire legion of angelic rebels and banishes them from heaven. Following the purge, God creates the world, culminating in his creation of Adam and Eve. While God gave Adam and Eve total freedom and power to rule over all creation, he gave them one explicit command not to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil on penalty of death. Now, we know how important the eating of that forbidden fruit is to these illuminists, because they believe that they're the illuminated ones, because they know of the knowledge of the tree of life. Let's not forget Genesis chapter 3, verse 22. The man has now become like one of us, knowing good and evil. He must not be allowed to reach out his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat and live forever. Genesis 3:22 is very significant to the occult. That is where the number for skull and bones 322 comes from. It comes as a reference to Genesis chapter 3, verse 22, man becoming like gods. So I'm sure once again, many people out there will say that we're crazy conspiracy theorists because they have been so trained by the government to reject everything that we all say, even though we're consistently proven right. And none of us are trying to prove that we're right. We're trying to help people wake up and come out of her. We're trying to get people back to a point where they realize that all of the chaos in the world is being controlled by this small group of people. But they've been so trained to hate us, to not believe anything that we say. And in fact, they've been trained at such a dumbed down level that they legitimately believe that the government does stuff like this to troll us. That's the common thinking among the sheeple. The government does these things to troll little old YouTubers like me and you. When we know how the government operates, we know how spell casting works, and they strategically knew that by naming this Milton, with all of the narrative that's been out there about Florida being paradise, with Paradise Lost, and of course, this being, as of now, it looks like this is going to be a catastrophic level hurricane, which of course is man-made. Now, let me show you this video, if you haven't seen it yet, called the Phoenix 2.0 simulation of a major hurricane striking Tampa. Now, you might see this and you might say, well, it's Florida. Florida gets hurricanes. Well, that's understandable. Florida does get hurricanes, but probably not as many as you think they're supposed to get, because a lot of them are man-made hurricanes. If you actually go through history of hurricanes in states like Florida and Texas, they are not as rampant as you might think. You're just desensitized into thinking it's a common occurrence now because they're happening so often. And through their mind control tactics, they're convincing you that this is happening so often because of climate change. When the reality is they're creating these things deliberately. So in this video that I'll play for you, two things to note. The Phoenix Project, Project Phoenix 2.0, is we all know, and if you don't know, I'll tell you, the significance to the phoenix. The phoenix rising from the ashes is a very common symbol used in the occult, used by Satanists. Why? They use the phoenix as a symbol of better things to come, a spiritual rebirth. There's a reason when those towers went down on the 11th day of the month of September, that when they were rebuilding with all of those strange things around that area, like those two huge pits that they put there that somehow they got away with without people being suspicious of, you may have noticed that they also put this thing called the oculus there. And by oculus, it means eye. And it's not two oculuses, it's one oculus. You might say, well, what does that matter? So the towers are there, we have two huge pits, and then we have something called the oculus, which represents one eye. Well, that's the all-seeing eye of Lucifer, the eye of providence that you see on the back of the dollar bill. You may have noticed that celebrities are obsessed with it because they're obsessed with their god, Lucifer. And if you didn't notice, the oculus is shaped as a phoenix rising out of the ashes. So very convenient that this is called the Phoenix Project 2.0. You know what else is convenient? Since this was put on their YouTube channel 4 years ago, look at the dates in this video as you see it. October 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, that region is when this storm hits. Well, how convenient. It's October 8th, 9th, 10th is when it's supposed to make landfall. I guess that's a coincidence too, right? Because it's hurricane season. I mean, if you're the kind of person who believes in coincidences, I'm sure you're also the kind of person that would answer the front door and allow the government to punch you directly in the face, and you would smile at them as they do it. And even as they're killing you and your family, you would probably say, yes, sir, may I have another? Because the people out there at this point who believe in coincidences are what the elites look at as useless eaters, and we're living among many of them. But we have to continue to try to wake them up. This is the Phoenix Project 2.0. You can't make it up.
And we have Category 1 Hurricane Phoenix just south of Jamaica now. Phoenix is currently expected to make landfall in the Yucatan Peninsula as a Category 2 storm. But of course, always, we are keeping a close eye on this system.
There has been a noticeable shift in the forecast track from the NHC overnight, which now brings Phoenix into our viewing area, possibly as a strong hurricane. Now is the time to begin those preparations, folks.
We have breaking news this morning if you're just joining us. The National Hurricane Center has upgraded our entire viewing area to a hurricane warning as Hurricane Phoenix is projected to make landfall as a major hurricane sometime tomorrow. Mandatory evacuations are in effect for all coastal regions. Forecasters say this storm could be one of the strongest ever to hit the Tampa Bay region.
We cannot stress enough how crucial it is that you finish your storm preparations tonight. Conditions will deteriorate rapidly tomorrow morning, and evacuation routes will quickly become impassable. Please don't take this lightly and heed all evacuation orders.
Folks, this is unfortunately the worst case scenario unfolding for the Tampa Bay area. Phoenix is now a Category 5 hurricane with maximum sustained winds at 160 miles an hour, but wind gusts up to 200 miles per hour. This is catastrophic. It is a historic storm and unfortunately making a beeline right now for our area.
We have a live look right now at North Tampa and Polk Street. I believe this is near Hawa Coffee, and as you can see, the storm surge has completely inundated downtown.
Law enforcement now is reporting that all bridges have been cut off by storm surge. We're looking at up to 20 feet of storm surge in some spots.
We're trapped on the third floor of the Tampa General Hospital parking garage, and the storm surge is up to the second floor of the hospital.
St. Petersburg is essentially an island right now.
A viewer from Brooksville is reporting roofs being torn off of businesses there, so this is a very important reminder that this is not just a coastal storm. We are seeing significant wind damage well inland.
Unbelievable gusts coming through. Oh my goodness.
The damage this morning is unimaginable. The beaches are essentially gone.
The Howard Franklin Bridge is completely destroyed. I've never seen anything like this.
Officials are scrambling to clean up debris from local airports in order for supplies to be flown in. We are getting reports from Homosassa of residents trapped by downed trees.
There's not a single business that we've driven by that doesn't have significant damage.
Tampa General Hospital has told us that they are unable to receive any patients after the hospital suffered significant damage from wind and storm surge. The level of destruction out here is indescribable. It's going to be a very long road to recovery for the Tampa Bay area.
So again, that's a hurricane simulation for Tampa Bay. And yes, Florida does get hit with hurricanes, but Tampa Bay has been a target for a while. And now it looks like this has the ability to completely wipe Tampa Bay off the map. You may have heard that they were talking about 20-foot, 15 to 20-foot waves in that simulation. How convenient, because they're talking about 15 to 20-foot waves hitting Tampa. You may have seen what they were saying in the video about winds and how strong the wind gusts could get. Something about 135 mile per hour winds. Well, that's nothing compared to what we're supposedly being told right now we could get. 200 mile per hour winds. So I'm sure that those are all major coincidences too. The name Milton, I'm sure, is a coincidence. I'm sure it was a coincidence on the 11th day of September when they were running a drill at the same exact time that all went down. I'm sure the same thing with the Boston Marathon event that occurred, or even any of these schools when they do active drills right at the same time that these events go down. I mean, can I continue? I sure can, because we can look at pretty much every event that we're told is supposed to be a real event or an event that's happening the way they're telling us it's happening, and it lines up with some type of simulated event occurring, and maybe none more blatantly obvious than Event 201, which again, they look at us when we talk about Event 201 and they have smirks on their face because they know that they have a large, dumbed-down communist audience that listens to the things that Bill Gates says and actually thinks that these people are not sinister, that these people are actually trying to help. That's how dumbed down of a society that we're living in. So anytime they bring up Event 201, you could see the grin on their faces. They have worse than duping delight. It's like crack delight. They're like giddy as can be, as if they just drank that red liquid that they love so much, which they probably do before they go on TV every time they go on TV anyway, right? So they always are smirking at us when we bring these events up because they know they can get away with it because the hypnotism that they have the people under is so thick. And as long as they can keep them divided, the civilians divided among each other based on political parties, it's no different than sports teams, right? It's no different than rooting for the New York Yankees or the Los Angeles Dodgers or the Yankees and the Red Sox or the Cowboys and the Eagles. That's what it's turned into, where people are loyal to their team and they don't care if their team comes out and tells them, hey, you know what? We're trying to murder you and the other team. And we don't really care what you think. That's what we're trying to do. And they expect you to look at them and smile and say, okie dokie, let me get my hat on and let me wave my little flag and have my beer while you do it. Because that's how dumbed down of a society we're living in now. So Hurricane Milton, just to recap, we have, again, 4 years in advance. You could look at these things and you could say to yourself, well, hurricanes happen in Tampa all the time. Oh, okay. Well, why are there simulations for these events? Why do they constantly show us these things right to our faces? We're supposed to believe that all of these are coincidental. What was the purpose of that simulation? Is that going to help a small business owner in Tampa? Is a small business owner going to stumble upon that today before they get drilled with this hurricane and say, hey, thankfully, there was this group that put out a pretty large looking production video that will help me figure out how to, oh wait, it won't help me do anything. It just literally shows Tampa Bay being leveled and the solutions really aren't there because my building is gone, my home is gone, and I'm lucky to be alive, but I fled the area because I'm not allowed to stay anyway. So thanks for the video. That really helps nobody get anything accomplished anyway, right? I mean, this is how they always operate. You got Hurricane Milton, you have John Milton. I'm sure it's a coincidence, right? Once again, just this huge tie-in with Christianity and the naming of it after the writer of Paradise Lost. And what are they going to come out? Are they going to tell you it was written after Milton Bradley? Is that what they're going to tell us? Oh, I mean, the hurricane was named after Milton Bradley. They wanted to play, Tiddlywinks or Guess Who, and they were like, let's name it Milton. Or the guy in Office Space, wasn't his name Milton? It's very clear what's going on around us for anybody paying attention. And people need to pay more attention. But most people out there continue to politicize these things. And if you continue to politicize these things, you've lost. You've lost. Because if you're putting your hope in the Republican Party as somebody who's a Christian or a conservative, you're completely doomed. Because they are about to lead you off of a cliff. And that is the purpose of what they're doing. They are herding you like cattle, keeping civilians from uniting together against a small group of wicked people who are so sick and sinister that they're actually using the weather as a weapon against innocent civilians who they look at as nothing more than goyim/cattle. I thank everybody for being here. Hope you're all doing well. God bless you and your families as always.